The chest sat beneath Elena's trembling hands like a coffin waiting to be opened. Her fingers, white-knuckled and shaking, pressed against the weathered oak as if holding back something terrible. Tears carved clean lines through the dust on her cheeks. "Don't touch that," she whispered, her voice breaking like glass against stone. But Thomas Garrett had already seen too much. The way she'd collapsed when he'd found her in the abandoned homestead. The way her eyes had gone wide with terror when his boot had knocked against the chest hidden beneath the rotted floorboards. The way she'd thrown herself between him and whatever lay inside. 3 hours earlier, he'd been tracking cattle thieves across the Badlands when he'd spotted smoke rising from the supposedly empty Morrison place. The family had vanished 2 winters back, just up and disappeared one February morning, leaving behind only questions and unpaid debts. Now someone was inside, and Thomas had a duty to his neighbors to investigate. He'd found Elena huddled in the corner of what used to be the kitchen, clutching a faded photograph to her chest. She was maybe 25, with the kind of beauty that belonged in drawing rooms, not abandoned shacks. Her dress had once been fine, dark blue silk with pearl buttons, but now it hung in tatters, stained with mud and something darker. "Ma'am?" he called softly, removing his hat. "You hurt?" She looked up at him with eyes the color of storm clouds, and he'd seen something in them that made his chest tighten. Not fear, something deeper. Guilt, maybe? Or shame so heavy it bent her spine. That's when his boot had found the chest. Now she knelt before it like a penitent before an altar, her whole body shaking with the effort of keeping the lid closed. The late afternoon sun slanted through broken windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. "Please," she breathed, not looking at him. "Just walk away. Pretend you never saw me here." But Thomas Garrett had never been good at walking away from trouble. His hands moved toward the chest despite her pleas. And that's when she told him who she really was. "I'm Elena Morrison." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Elena Morrison, the banker's daughter who'd supposedly run off with a traveling salesman. The girl whose disappearance had torn the town apart, setting neighbor against neighbor with accusations and suspicion. The ghost that haunted every conversation in Millbrook saloons. She was also the girl whose father had put a $1,000 bounty on her head. "That's impossible," Thomas said, though even as the words left his mouth, he could see the truth in the curve of her jaw, the set of her shoulders. She had her father's stubborn chin. "You died." Everyone said what they needed to say. Her voice carried a bitterness that seemed too old for her face. What was easier to believe? Thomas felt the world tilt beneath his feet. If Elena Morrison was alive, if she was here. The chest suddenly felt heavier, more dangerous. Whatever was inside had driven her to fake her own death, to let her family mourn her for 2 years. "The salesman?" he asked. "There was no salesman." She laughed, but it came out broken. "There was only this." Her hand pressed harder against the chest lid. Thomas could see the brass hinges straining against her weight, as if something inside was pushing back. "Your father's been looking for you. Half the territory's been looking. My father knows exactly where I am." The words came out like poison. "He's always known." Thomas stared at her, pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. The way James Morrison had seemed almost relieved when the search parties came back empty. The way he'd insisted his daughter was dead, even when others held out hope. The way he'd moved on so quickly, already planning to remarry. "The bounty isn't for bringing me home." Elena's eyes met his, and he saw something in them that made his blood run cold. "It's for making sure I never come back." Thomas's hand hovered over his gun belt. $1,000 was more money than he'd see in 5 years of ranching. Enough to buy his own spread, maybe find a wife, start the family he'd been dreaming about. All he had to do was ride into town and tell James Morrison where his daughter was hiding. But first, he needed to know what was in the chest. His fingers found the latch. The lid creaked open like the gates of hell. Thomas had expected gold, maybe, or documents that could destroy a man's reputation. What he found instead made his knees buckle. Bones, Small ones, yellow with age. And wrapped among them, a tiny dress, no bigger than what a child of 3 might wear. Blue ribbons still tied in careful bows despite the years. A cornhusk doll with button eyes, its face worn smooth by little hands. "Dear God," he whispered. Her name was Sarah. Elena's voice came from somewhere far away. She would have been 7 now. Thomas couldn't breathe. The bones seemed to glow in the dying light, accusatory and silent. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was seeing, but every thought led to the same terrible conclusion. "My sister," Elena continued, her words falling like stones into still water. "The one who supposedly died of fever the winter before I disappeared. But the doctor said what my father paid him to say." Elena stood slowly, her legs unsteady. "Just like the sheriff said what he was paid to say. Just like everyone says what they're paid to say when James Morrison writes the checks." Thomas's world was collapsing around him. He'd known James Morrison all his life, had bought cattle from him, shared drinks with him, considered him a pillar of the community. The man had a memorial stone for Sarah in the town cemetery. He visited it every Sunday after church. Why? The word came out strangled. Because Sarah saw things. Said things? Elena's face had gone white as bone. About what happened in Daddy's study after Mama died. About the men who came to visit late at night. About the sounds from the cellar. Thomas felt sick. The implications crashed over him like a flood. A little girl who'd witnessed something unspeakable. A father who'd chosen silence over justice. A daughter who'd learned the truth too late. "You tried to protect her. I tried to run with her." Elena's voice broke completely now. "But he found us at the old line shack. Said it was too dangerous to let her live with what she knew. Said it was for the good of the family." Thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky had been clear moments before. Thomas looked up to see riders cresting the hill, 3 of them, moving fast. Even from this distance, he could make out the glint of badges on their chests. Elena saw them too. Her face went ashen. "He knows I'm here," she whispered. "He's always known." The riders were James Morrison's men. Thomas recognized the sheriff's distinctive black horse, the deputy's silver-studded saddle. They'd be here in minutes, and when they arrived, Elena Morrison would disappear for good this time. "There's a root cellar behind the house," Thomas said, his mind racing. "You can hide there until there's no hiding from this." Elena closed the chest with reverent care, her movements steady now that the end was near. "There never was." Thomas's hand went to his gun. 3 against 1 weren't good odds, but he'd faced worse. The problem was that these weren't outlaws he could shoot down without consequence. These were lawmen, even if they wore badges bought with blood money. "Why'd you come back?" he asked. "After 2 years, why risk everything?" Elena lifted the chest, cradling it against her body like the child it held had never been cradled in life. "Because she deserves better than an unmarked grave in these woods. She deserves to be buried proper, in consecrated ground, with people who knew her name." The riders were close enough now that Thomas could hear their horses' hoofbeats drumming against the hard-packed earth. Soon they'd see his horse tethered outside, would know someone else was here. "I could tell them you got away," he said. "Give you a head start. They'll kill you for interfering." "Maybe." Elena studied his face in the fading light, searching for something. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Thomas thought about Sarah Morrison, about a little girl who died because she'd spoken truth in a world that preferred lies. He thought about the $1,000 bounty, about the life he could build with that money. He thought about the man he believed James Morrison to be, and the monster he actually was. "Some things are worth more than money," he said. The riders were at the fence line now. Thomas could see the sheriff's face, hard and determined. Behind him rode 2 deputies Thomas didn't recognize, hired guns, most likely, brought in specifically for this job. Elena stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell the sage in her hair, the fear on her skin. "There's something else," she whispered. "Something I haven't told you." The riders spurred their horses toward the house. I know who killed the children in town last summer. The words stopped Thomas's heart cold. 5 children had died over the course of 3 months, officially from a fever outbreak, though no adult had taken sick. The youngest had been 4, the oldest 8. All from families who'd fallen behind on loans to Morrison's bank. The same man who killed Sarah, Elena continued, her voice barely audible over the approaching hoofbeats. The same man who's been killing children for years whenever they become inconvenient. Thomas stared at her, understanding flooding through him like ice water. This wasn't just about one little girl's murder. This was about a pattern of death stretching back God knew how long, all covered up by a man with enough money to buy silence from anyone who mattered. The sheriff called out from the yard. "Hello, the house! We're looking for someone." Elena pressed something into Thomas's hand, a folded paper, yellow with age. Sarah wrote down what she saw. Names, dates, places. I kept it all these years, waiting for someone brave enough to make it matter. Thomas looked down at the paper, then back at Elena. She was smiling now, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look like the young woman she should have been instead of the broken thing she'd become. "They'll kill us both," he said. "I know." The sheriff's voice came again, closer now. "We know you're in there, Miss Morrison. Your father's worried sick." Elena laughed, a sound like silver bells ringing in a graveyard. "No," she called back. "He's not." Thomas made his choice. He drew his gun and stepped to the window, the paper Elena had given him safely tucked inside his vest. Outside, 3 men sat their horses in the gathering dusk, their hands already reaching for their weapons. "This doesn't have to end badly," the sheriff called. "Just send the girl out, and everyone goes home." "She's already home," Thomas replied. The silence stretched between them like a held breath. Elena moved to stand beside Thomas at the window, still clutching her sister's remains. In the distance, church bells were ringing in Millbrook, calling people to evening prayer, calling them to remember the dead. "Thank you," Elena whispered. Thomas nodded once. Then he aimed his gun at the sheriff's chest and pulled the trigger. The gunfight that followed was brief but decisive. When the smoke cleared, 4 bodies lay in the dust, 3 lawmen and 1 rancher who'd chosen conscience over coin. Elena Morrison knelt beside Thomas in his final moments, holding his hand as the light faded from his eyes. She buried them all before dawn, Thomas in the cemetery beside the church, Sarah in the plot their father had kept empty for show. The paper Elena had given Thomas found its way to a federal marshal 2 counties over, a man James Morrison had never thought to buy. By winter, Morrison was hanging from a tree in his own front yard. Elena Morrison was never seen again.